Welcome back to Slithering Salamanderscapes. This is going to be a rebuild of my black-chinned red salamander Paludarium. It's a 40-gallon. If you followed me long enough, you will know that this is going to be the third time I'm going to redo this. I am not sure yet how much of this I am going to redo, but there's just too much flooding under the land part, and I believe that is helping create an oversaturation of nutrients, which is unfortunately creating more cyanobacteria and other things that I just don't like. The salamanders seem fine, but I just am not happy with it anymore, and so I'm going to try my best to not destroy the entire thing, but I am going to definitely be doing a rebuild. So with that in mind, let's get started and let's walk you through the steps. As you can see, I've just been draining water in this bucket essentially the entire time I've had this enclosure going, which is like well over a year and a half at this point. It's just not worth it. I've got to fix the problem and just hopefully redo as little as possible. I mean, you can see the algae everywhere. It's just not ideal. And I really like this enclosure. I like the general structure, so I'm just going to start removing everything. Some of the driftwood here with the moss on it. I'm going to also remove the animals here shortly. But you can see there's a ton of moss, pieces of cork bark, things like that. Here are the red salamanders here in a second. I'll show you. I get both of the adults out, and then there's also, remember, one larva, salamander left. He just is the biggest one and refuses to metamorphose into one of these. So hence why I have so much water. And I'd always have a little bit of water in there in case they ever breed. But here's the. I mean, he's massive. He's just a unit. Look at him. So there's some Amano shrimp and some Nerite snails in there. This is all RO water, by the way, that I put in there in this clean tub. Cool RO water. I took the plants out, and I'm going to have the sun here in my kitchen. This is all the plants that had cyanobacteria and stuff, and I treated the water, and I put them, so those are all the aquatic plants with the, it's not a chemical, I forget what it's called, Top Life, and basically it eats away at the cyanobacteria. But anyways, that's where I'm keeping the aquatic salamander, and I've got an air stone. So everything's kind of out where it should be at this point. You can see one of the shrimp in there, the salamanders behind there. So there's some blackworms in case they get hungry. So this is going to be good. They're both in two tubs here, as you can see. And now I'm going to start removing all of this substrate. As you can see, I already removed the land substrate, which is really just fluvial stratum and some other stuff. I'm also vacuuming out everything. I want to get all this old substrate out. It's just saturated in nutrients and cyanobacteria. I'm not even going to try to do anything with it. I'm just going to get rid of it. And the T-bar is back there where the water was coming out, so I'm going to have to pull all this apart to get to it. And the water was basically dripping in there from behind where the bulkhead is and everything. So I got to figure out why the water has been draining into the land area. I also have to take all of that, all of those clay balls out. And as you can see, that's where the water was coming out on both sides. I am going to completely restructure this. It's not going to be a drip hole anymore. It's just I don't think it's working well. So I have to pull this apart to get to the bulkhead and figure out what the problem is, and then kind of reevaluate when I do that. But it got it pretty clean at this point. Most of the stuff is out, and that is the T-bar valve where the water was going. And so basically, I've cut it with a box cutter, as you can see, and I am going to take the T-bar, the T-valve, out. It's hard to. It's going to basically, just by me moving it, I got to use some pliers, and I'm going to have to break some of those rocks. I was able to get it off, but I had to remove some rocks, and you can see that is the bulkhead, the return bulkhead. And so water, everything there is just soaked. Water has been dripping down, so the bulkhead has not been as secure as it should have been, so that's one of the reasons water was getting down behind the background and seeping in. So this is what it looks like now. The water will just come out straight, but it's still dripping down and it's going to get into the land area, so I can't have that. So I'm going to have to figure something else out, because if I press on that, you can see it's just, that's foam. It's just saturated in water, and water will systematically drip in here until that fills up, and then you will have an anaerobic problem, and you don't want that. So I got to figure out how to divert the water and fix the bulkhead, and also essentially just stop the water from dripping back here. Otherwise, it's just never going to work. Yeah, it's crazy that, you know, multiple times I thought I fixed this thing and I just never was able to fix it. So this is, you know, this is going to be the last time, I hope. I actually attached a threaded nozzle thing to this. I don't even know what it's called, but bought it from Home Depot. But it was like $2, and it is now something I don't need to conceal, but it is doing what I want with the water. I also put some plumber's tape on it because I noticed that water was leaking also out of between the threads. So I also tightened the bulkhead so it won't leak. Looks like one of those statues that is going to the bathroom. Anyways, kind of like it, but you know, I'm gonna actually add this black hose, which is from a Fluval filter, and I will note that it is not saturated anymore. It was pretty dry. I actually tested this overnight. There was no leaks. It is completely dry under there. Thank God. Water was dripping from both, and it was literally just dripping right behind all the foam. And so that was one of the main problems. And now it's in good shape. I've had it going for over a day, and I'm just pretty happy with it. And so now I just need to figure out how to conceal the hose and go from there. But I also put some foam inside the hose there. It was, you know, I don't want salamanders to be able to get in there, so I used the Great Stuff Pond and Stone, as you can see here. I'm not wearing gloves in this picture, but I wore them most of the time. Be careful, you don't want to get that on your hands. It'll take you a long time to get it off, believe me. And I'm just kind of refoaming some of the rocks back in to conceal the foam and other things. And you know, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover everything with moss, and I'm going to probably use some cork bark to put the hose and the little spigot thing out there on the end to conceal it. But I'm pretty happy with this right now. I feel pretty confident that, you know, nothing else is going to happen. So here's the cork bark. I'm just going to have to foam around it, and then the water will come out there. I think it's kind of cool. It's definitely perfect for concealing this thing. So, you know, I'm just going to use some foam here, some rocks, and some other stuff to help kind of build it up so it doesn't look bad. But as you can see, I got some of the rocks in. I'm using some tape to hold things in. As you can see, you don't want any gaps. You don't want salamanders to be able to get back up in there, or any animals for that matter. So what I'm doing is I'm letting a lot of this stuff get hard, you know, or like firm until you can pull it off, and it's completely expanded. The other thing is I've put some filter floss or filter foam, whatever you want to call it, inside there so the salamanders can't crawl up around the where the water's coming out. And then I've just matted down. I've pressed a lot of the Great Stuff foam down. I've also, I guess, you know, peeled some stuff away as well. And I just to kind of conceal everything. I'm not gonna silicone stuff and drop a whole bunch of coconut fiber or dirt or sand or anything. I'm just gonna put moss all around that. There's no need to do all that. But yeah, I kind of like the way it looks. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of other wood in here, so I don't think it looks too strange. You know, there's tons of wood over there on the left. There's also some wood on the right. But you know, I think this looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna have some other wood on the in the hardscape. But yeah, you know, like it's tons of algae and cyanobacteria that's dried. Some of it's real algae, which I don't mind, but man, the cyanobacteria, that stuff is terrible. So let's get started here on the substrate. This is all fluval stratum. I have basically put a nice thick layer of this down across the entire enclosure. This is really good substrate for plants to grow, and I've always had good success with it. So it's pretty pricey, but I put that down. Looks good. I've also now added a layer of fine gravel. It is a also gray, which is nice. The substrate I used previously was not. I have a ton of this. I bought a couple bags of it, and I only used one bag in here, and I have like enough to fill a sandbox. So I don't know why I bought so much, but I like the way it looks. I also smashed up some these rocks to get this look here, to get a little bit more of a natural look. Once this is all wet, it all looks the same color. By the way, this is just dry, and it will look like everything else. I've also got some bigger rocks I'm going to add here shortly, which are more slate pieces that are a little bit more natural looking, to really build up the hardscape, as you can see. I also want to give places that the animals, if they ever do lay eggs and mate, that there is an appropriate spot for that. Plus, the animals should have a place to hide. It's just the it's the way they are. They need that. You don't want them to get stressed out. But I think it looks really good, pretty natural. Really happy with the way that this is coming around. I really thought I was going to have to just destroy the whole thing and start from scratch. But so what I'm doing here is I'm really just planting moss everywhere where it was a drip wall before. So I'm just going to cover everything with moss. Different kinds of moss. So in some cases, I'm putting damp sphagnum moss underneath as a growing medium, but really moss doesn't necessarily need that. But I'm just doing it right now to make sure that the moss stays hydrated and it wicks water. So I have a couple other areas here that I need to cover, but I'm going to kind of make my way around the tank here and continue to cover stuff. I even have moss. I put also the aquatic plants and some Java moss in certain places, and a Nubius, that's dwarf sag. Remember, a lot of these plants probably still have cyanobacteria because I've only been treating the plants for a couple of days, but I wanted to get them back in here. So what I'm going to actually do is treat the entire tank for cyanobacteria. I'm with the Top Life blue-green algae stain remover. So I'm not going to put the animals in this video. So I'm going to fill it up, and I've already mixed the compound in, which eats away. It takes about a week and a half to 2 weeks to really see it. And so I'm just going to fill it up. Things looking pretty clear. I'll probably do a couple water changes too, but I'm going to let the water go first. And this is perfect, by the way. The way the water's coming out, it's moving the water all over the tank. So there's not going to be any dead spots, which is great. A little cloudy right now, but it will clear up here in no time. But like I said, not going to put the animals yet at this point. It's just not, I think they're fine. I know I've had inverts in there with this stuff before and it's been fine, but I just don't want to risk it. So I'm going to wait a while until I feel like there's no cyanobacteria at all, and I will do a pretty big water change, and then I will introduce the animals. But as you can see, the water is actually moving. It's hard to tell, but I can see it moving. And so that's what you want. You want it to be nice and clean. And in here I've put the hydro balls or hydrodin, whatever you want to call it, back. And I've got this mesh screen to separate that from the substrate, which again is fluval stratum and some gravel. And it's pretty moist. I didn't get rid of that. I thought there's no reason to throw that away. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to continue to plant this sucker and get everything back in here, like these pieces of driftwood with the moss on it. I really love this piece. This one's really cool. And the cool thing about this one is that there's a little bit of water pulling in certain areas, and it's circulating. And so I believe that the moss will wick that water up, and it will keep this moss hydrated. And so I'm really, really happy about that. And then just other things like, here on the land, I am, I put a lot of leaves down and some dried sphagnum moss, things like that. There's no point in putting moss there because I'm going to have cork bark or driftwood over it, and so it won't get any light. It'll just die anyways. So just putting some stuff down that is natural. Those leaves I sanitized, as good as I could. And I'm going to mess around with the pieces of driftwood here to try to make it look like maybe one piece or some kind of structure. It's really just like a puzzle or Tetris at the end of the day. You just need to figure out what looks realistic. It's just a lot of trial and error. Honestly, this is the hardest part for me. I'm only filming a little bit of it, but it could take I couldn't even tell you. Sometimes I'm like messing around with this stuff for hours, and I'll be like, I gotta get away from it. I'll go upstairs and I'll like watch Netflix, and then I'll stop it midway through a show and I'll come back down and be like, nah, I have an idea, and then I'll come back down and mess with it. So it's really just a matter of figuring out what you like, what you think looks like a natural setting or habitat. And so, that's kind of just what I do. As you can see, I put some moss now under the where the water's coming down. And so, it's again just a matter of your taste and how you want things to look. It's really your work of art, right? At the end of the day, it's your creative masterpiece, if you will. So, but anyways, I'm definitely liking the way this is looking. I've planted some more moss at this point. I've also taken some rocks to help hide the hose for where the water's coming out. But I think it looks pretty good. I think it looks pretty natural. I didn't put my pothos back in. I just felt like it was a little too much. I don't want to take away from the moss. Maybe at some point I'll put it back in. I was growing the pothos out of the water, but water looks good. I think that these dwarf sage will start to multiply here pretty soon. And grow in, so there'll be like a little bit of a carpet. But yeah, I really, really like the gravel, and I really like these other granite or shale rocks that I put in. Not granite, sorry, they're shale, but they look really good. They're matching. I think before I had like a red sandy color, just didn't look right because it was just what I had. There's some wood there too. It's kind of dirty. I'm gonna have to wipe that off, but everything looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. There's some cool plants actually growing right out of the inside the cork bark and some moss, which is really cool. Love that. Just things just kind of popping up. But yeah, I've got everything from whipworts, which is a type of liverwort. Oh, and by the way, that really green moss right there, that is sphagnum moss that I have been growing myself for months. And I have it in multiple bins. It's really easy to grow. You just need a little bit and it starts to grow. And so I'm really hoping it takes off in here because I really like that. It's just a really cool moss to have if it's nice and green like that. Most people only work with dried sphagnum moss. I really like the real stuff if you can get it. But yeah, everything is looking good. There's some liverworts in here, like I said, that are going to grow, and I think it looks pretty good. I'm also going to add some more plants here, but really happy with the way that this came out. Can't forget, got to put some springtails in. As you can see, they're crawling around. I have a huge culture, probably with millions of them, so I put springtails in. These are just small tempered springtails. Another thing, by the way, in my moss, I definitely sanitize my moss by cleaning it, but I will tell you, sometimes there's isopods and other inverts, beetles, spiders. You're not going to always get everything. I've never had a problem with it. I know some people are really finicky about that stuff, but I do everything I can, but I'm not going to drop my moss into a bleach bathtub or like or hydrogen peroxide. Also added some oak leaf creeping fig there. I thought that would look cool. Yeah, and there's also some liverworts I added right around the bottom and some other aquatic moss. I'm really psyched about this one. I think this is a really, really cool build. I also think that this is going to be pretty appropriate for these salamanders as well. I think the other one was, but I think I fixed these problems. These problems honestly kept me up at night. Like I couldn't stand that the fact that there was multiple horrible, disgusting cyanobacteria outbreaks, that this thing was leaking all the time, and I constantly had to let the drain valve go just so I didn't have some anaerobic conditions. The animals are going to love this one. I think that, like I said, in 2 weeks I'm going to put it back in, but I think it looks pretty natural. I think it's an appropriate habitat, and I'm really psyched. And, let me know if you like it. If you don't, tell me why. I always like to know why people like things or don't like things. But, at the end of the day, I feel good about it, and I am happy that I redid it. So appreciate everyone tuning in to check this rebuild, or modification I should call it, and definitely excited. I have a couple new builds in mind in rebuilds for certain enclosures that I have, so really appreciate all of the support. And if you haven't, like, subscribe, and I hope that you all have a great day.